Glass rained down from the chapel windows of St. Basil's like sharp confetti, and Maya Whitfield was on her knees in her bridesmaid dress, staring at the man covering her body with his own, realizing she didn't know his real name. 3 weeks earlier, the storm rolling off Lake Ontario had turned the University of Toronto campus into a smear of grey and silver, rain hammering sideways against the tall windows of Robarts Library. Maya Whitfield had claimed her usual spot on the 8th floor an hour before the building filled up, because midterms made the place feel like a refugee camp for the exhausted. She was 23, a second-year nursing student, and she had not slept more than 5 hours a night in 9 days. Her mother, Diane, had died of an aneurysm 14 months ago. Fast and without warning, the kind of death that leaves no time to say the things you meant to say. Since then it had just been Maya, a half-empty apartment on Spadina, and a stack of student loan statements she didn't open right away anymore. She found a table near the back, away from the group study pods, where people whispered too loudly about things that weren't midterms. There was already someone sitting at the far end of it. A man, maybe mid-20s, dark hair pushed back like he hadn't thought about it in days, wearing a black wool coat that looked too expensive for a campus library in February. He had a laptop open in front of him that he wasn't looking at. His eyes were on the room. Maya hesitated with her arms full of anatomy textbooks. Every other table was packed solid elbow to elbow, the air thick with instant coffee and wet umbrellas drying against chair legs. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. He looked up at her the way a man looks up when he's been somewhere else entirely in his head. Dark eyes, a stillness to him that made the people walking past instinctively widen their path, the way water moves around a stone. He studied her. The soaked ponytail, the dark circles, the cardigan that had definitely come from a Value Village rack, and something in his face eased just slightly. He nodded toward the chair. "Thank you," Maya said, dropping into it like her legs had been waiting for permission to give out. "It's a madhouse up here today." "Midterms," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges, like it didn't get used much. He wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes had drifted back toward the stairwell doors. That was when he saw them. 2 men had come up from the stairwell, not the elevator, both of them in dark overcoats that did nothing to hide the build. Underneath, men who'd made their living with their shoulders and their hands. Not with books. He recognized the taller one immediately. Dmitry Volkov, a name that meant something very specific and very bad in certain parts of this city. A fixer for Anatoly Resnik, who ran the largest piece of the Eastern European network west of the 401 and had been at war, quietly and viciously, with the Brennan family for the better part of 2 years over the warehouses along the lakeshore. His hand had already drifted toward the inside of his coat before he caught himself. But Volkov wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the girl. "I'm Maya, by the way." She'd pulled a yellow highlighter out of her bag, completely unaware that 2 of the more dangerous men in the city were now standing 50 feet away near the periodicals, pretending to read magazines they had no interest in. He let his hand fall back to the table. "Leon," he said. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, Leon." She gave him a small, tired smile. "Don't worry, I won't talk your ear off. I just need to get through the renal system before my brain gives up entirely." He watched her instead of answering right away, watched the way she was completely unguarded, completely ordinary, while 50 feet away Volkov shifted his stance just enough to keep her in his sightline, and the second man checked the location of the stairwell exit without ever looking like he was checking anything. They weren't hunting. They were guarding. "You from the city?" he asked. Careful, casual, born and raised, Scarborough originally, she kept highlighting. "Just me and my mum growing up." She was an ER nurse actually at Sunnybrook. She passed last year. A small shrug, the kind people learn to perform after enough time has gone by that the shrug is easier than the explanation. "Never knew my dad. Mum always said he was a merchant marine, gone before I was even born. Pretty standard, sad story, honestly. His mind was already working, fitting pieces together the way men in his line of work learned, do whether they want to or not. 20-some years back there'd been a story. Barely a rumor anymore, the kind of thing older men told over whiskey when they thought no one was really listening. About Anatoly Reznik surviving an attempt on his life outside St. Michael's Hospital, and a young nurse who'd kept him breathing until the ambulance got there, and for a brief, reckless stretch after that, the coldest man in the Reznik organization had fallen in love. The streets said there'd been a child, a daughter kept entirely outside the business, hidden behind ordinary names and ordinary jobs, and an invisible wall of careful men. He looked at the exhausted nursing student across the table, worrying over a diagram of nephrons, and felt something cold settle into his stomach. "I'm sorry about your mum," he said quietly. "It's okay," and then she smiled. A real one, warm, the kind that didn't owe anybody anything, and it landed somewhere in his chest he hadn't expected it to land. "I'm getting by." He glanced toward Volkov, who was now watching him over the top of a magazine with open suspicion. If only you knew, he thought. You're sitting with the enemy. 3 weeks slid past in a blur of shared coffees from the cart outside Sydney Smith, late study sessions that ran past closing quiet walks along the boardwalk when the rain finally let up. Leon found himself pulled toward her in a way that made no professional sense at all. She was everything his world wasn't, open, unguarded, entirely without an angle. For the first time since he was 19 years old, he caught himself wanting to walk away from the Brennan organization entirely, wanting a life where his biggest problem was a pharmacology final instead of federal surveillance. But the Brennans didn't let people simply walk away. Nobody important ever just walked away. On a bitter Thursday night, he got the call to come to a meatpacking warehouse out near the junction. The kind of building that still smelled like 100 years of blood in the concrete, even with nothing hanging from the rails anymore. In the back office, behind a desk that had clearly been salvaged from somewhere nicer, sat Patrick Brennan. Patrick had inherited his power the way a lot of dangerous men do. Not through respect, but through the simple terror of being unpredictable. "Sit down, Leon." Patrick tapped a thick folder against the desk. "We caught a break. A good one." Leon kept his face still. "What kind of break, boss?" "Detective Marchetti finally earned that retainer we pay him." Patrick flicked the folder open and slid a surveillance photo across the desk. Grainy, taken with a long lens through a library window, sealed medical records. Turns out Reznik's ghost is real, a legitimate biological daughter hiding in plain sight this whole time. The cold in Leon's stomach turned to ice. "That right," he managed. "And look at this." Patrick tapped the corner of the photo. There, blurred in the background near the stairwell doors, was Leon's own coat. "You're already in. Doing recon on the enemy's blood and you didn't even know it. I always said you had good instincts, kid." Leon's mouth had gone dry. "She doesn't know who she is, Patrick. She thinks her father was a merchant marine. Who cares what she thinks?" Patrick laughed, sharp and humorless. "Reznik cares, that's the whole point. We take her tomorrow night down to the container yard at the Portlands, and we call him. He signs the lakeshore warehouses over to us, or he gets his little girl back in pieces." "Tomorrow," Leon said, his voice gone flat. "Volkov's detail thins out Friday nights. Just him and one other guy. You get close to her, you keep her isolated. We move in, 2 for Volkov, and she's in the van before she even knows what's happening. Do this clean, Leon, and you're made. For real this time." He left the warehouse feeling like the cold off the lake had gotten inside him and stayed there. If the Brennans grabbed her, it would set off a war that would turn half the city into a crime scene. And Maya, sweet, exhausted, completely ordinary Maya, who didn't even know her own name, would be standing right in the middle of it. He found her down by the harbourfront the next evening, wrapped in her coat, holding a paper cup of hot apple cider from one of the kiosks, watching the lit-up shape of the ferry terminal across the dark water. "Leon." Her face opened up when she saw him, the way it always did. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Maya." He grabbed her by the shoulders, and his urgency wiped the smile right off her face. "We need to go, right now. What? Why? You're hurting me. I'm sorry." He loosened his grip but didn't let go, his eyes already scanning the path behind her. 40 yards back, leaning against a lamp post with a cigarette he wasn't really smoking, was Dmitry Volkov. Resnick's watchdog exactly where he was supposed to be. "Leon, you're scaring me." She pulled back. "What's going on with you lately? I feel like I'm losing my mind. I keep seeing the same guys everywhere I go. The ones from the library. I swear one of them follows me. You're not losing your mind." His voice shook slightly. "Maya, there's things about your life, about your family, that you don't know." He never got to finish. A black SUV came around the corner of Queen's Quay with its headlights off, accelerating hard, tires chewing the wet pavement. Patrick hadn't waited for Friday. "Get down!" Leon roared. The side door slid open before the vehicle had even stopped moving, 3 men in balaclavas already armed. At the exact same instant, Volkov dropped his cigarette and pulled a long-barreled revolver from inside his coat, sprinting toward them with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size. Maya screamed as the first suppressed rounds shattered the glass of a nearby ticket kiosk. Leon wrapped his arms around her and took her down to the wet concrete as the 2 most dangerous organizations in the city opened fire over her head. He pinned her behind the concrete base of a light standard, while bullets stitched across the kiosk they'd been standing in front of seconds earlier. She had her hands pressed over her ears, breath coming in short, ragged pulls, the smell of cordite and wet stone filling the air around her. She had her eyes shut tight, certain she was about to die on the cold ground with her anatomy notes scattered uselessly somewhere in the dark. 50 feet away, Volkov earned every dollar Anatoly Resnick had ever paid him. He didn't dive for cover. He walked forward into it, with a terrible, deliberate calm that didn't match his size at all. He raised the revolver and fired, and the first round took the driver of the SUV straight through the windshield. The vehicle swerved hard and slammed into a concrete planter. "Stay down," Leon barked, his voice gone hard in a way she'd never heard from him. Before any of this, before the Brennans, before the library, Leon had spent 3 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, 2 tours overseas, a part of his life he kept buried so deep most people who knew him now had no idea it existed. Muscle memory came back to him like it had never left. He drew the pistol from inside his coat and put 2 rounds into the chest of one of the masked men, trying to flank Volkov, dropping him to the wet pavement. Volkov turned his head, eyes going wide for a second, as he registered that the quiet kid from the library was in fact a trained shooter putting down Brennan's soldiers. There wasn't time to question it. The 2 remaining men laid down heavy suppressing fire, forcing Volkov behind a concrete planter, a chunk of stone splintering off and tearing through his shoulder. He grunted, his hand going to the wound, blood already soaking through his coat. "Volkov's hit!" Leon shouted. He grabbed Maya's shoulder, forcing her to look at him. "Maya, listen to me. When I start shooting, you run to him and you get him behind that planter. You're a nurse. Keep him from bleeding out. I don't even know who that is. He's your father's man, and he's the only reason we're not already dead. Go." He stepped out from behind the post, exposing himself, laying down fire that forced the remaining gunmen back behind the wrecked SUV. Maya scrambled across the wet concrete on pure adrenaline and got into the cover of the planter just as Volkov slumped against it, his face going pale. "Miss Resnick," he wheezed. "Shut up and hold still," she snapped, a sudden hard focus cutting through the panic. She tore off her scarf and pressed it against the wound near his collarbone with both hands. He hissed in pain but nodded, something like grim respect crossing his face. Sirens were building somewhere downtown. The remaining Brennan men, knowing they had maybe 2 minutes before the first cruiser arrived, abandoned the bodies and ran for a second vehicle parked near the loading docks. "Can you walk?" Leon asked, hauling Volkov up by his good arm. "My truck. Black Tahoe, 50 feet north." Volkov tossed him the keys with a blood-slicked hand. They got him into the back seat, Maya climbing in beside him, keeping pressure on the wound. Leon dropped into the driver's seat and pulled out hard, merging onto Lake Shore as the first squad cars came down toward the harbourfront from the other direction. The drive into the underground stretch of the Gardiner was lit a sickly orange, Leon checking the mirrors every few seconds. In the back, the silence was heavier than the gunfire had been, broken only by Volkov's breathing and the hum of the heater. Maya's hands were covered in blood. She stared at the back of Leon's head, watching the pieces snap together somewhere behind her eyes. "Miss Resnick," she said quietly, the name tasting strange in her own mouth. She looked down at Volkov. "Who is my father?" He closed his eyes, head tipping back against the window. "Anatoly Resnick. Runs everything east of the Humber. Your mother made him promise to keep you out of it. She wanted you to have something normal. He had your birth record sealed, paid off half of City Hall to do it. I've been watching out for you since you were in elementary school, kid." Maya felt something drop out from under her. Her whole life, the loans, the late rent, the quiet, lonely grief of her mother's funeral. None of it had been an accident. It had been built carefully, around her like a stage set. She looked up and met Leon's eyes in the rearview mirror. "And you? Were you watching me since elementary school too?" His hands tightened on the wheel until the knuckles went white. "No. I work for Brennan. I'm low level, a runner, mostly. Patrick found out you existed through a dirty cop. I was supposed to get close to you, find what made you vulnerable. He was coming tonight to take you, to use you against your father for the Lakeshore territory." She recoiled like she'd been struck. The quiet, careful boy from the library, the one who'd brought her coffee and listened to her complain about exams, had been an operative the entire time. "You lied to me." Her voice broke on the words, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "I did," his voice had gone rough, "but I didn't let them take you. I just burned my whole life down to protect you, Maya. The Brennans will kill me for what I did tonight on that pier, but I wasn't going to let them touch you. Pull over, Maya. We're not safe yet. I said pull over." He braked hard, pulling the truck into an abandoned loading bay under the financial district. He turned in his seat, half expecting her to bolt. She didn't move. She looked down at the blood on her hands. The blood of her father's man. A man who'd just taken a bullet, protecting her, and something in her face changed. The girl who'd woken up that morning worrying about a pharmacology midterm was gone, burned away somewhere back on the wet concrete of the harbourfront. She thought of her mother, who had lied to her every single day to keep her safe, only for that safety to have been a fiction the whole time. She wasn't Maya Whitfield's struggling nursing student anymore. She was a Resnick, and she was being hunted. "You know how Brennan operates," she said, her voice dropping into something low and very steady. "His roots, his safe houses, his men." Leon nodded slowly. "I know everything. Good." A pause, the new coldness in her settling into place like something that had always been waiting under the surface. "Take me to my father." The Resnick property sat back from Lakeshore Road in Oakville behind iron gates and old maple trees, a long grey stone house that looked more like a private museum than a home. The moment Leon pulled the bullet-pocked Tahoe up to the gatehouse, a dozen armed men surrounded the vehicle. 10 minutes later, Maya stood in the center of a study that smelled of leather and good scotch. Anatoly Resnick sat behind a desk that could have anchored a small ship, a man in his late 50s with silver threading through dark hair, radiating the kind of stillness that came from never once needing to raise his voice. But when his eyes landed on her, that stillness cracked. He saw the ghost of the nurse he'd loved 20 years ago. He saw instantly and completely the scale of his failure. "Maya," he rose slowly. "Don't." She held up a hand stained with Volkov's blood, and the gesture stopped him cold. "My mother is dead. You let us live alone all those years pretending I was safe, and tonight a man named Patrick Brennan tried to have me kidnapped and killed. Whatever illusion you were keeping going is over now." Anatoly's eyes went hard and lethal in a way that had nothing to do with her. He turned them on Leon, standing near the door, flanked by 4 guards. "And this piece of garbage is one of Brennan's. Tell me why he's breathing in my house." "Because he saved my life," Maya said, stepping between her father and Leon. "And because we're going to use him to end Patrick Brennan tonight." Anatoly studied her, really studied her. The frightened girl burned away somewhere out by the lake. In her place stood someone with his blood, his calculation, and a frighteningly precise understanding of leverage she had no business knowing how to use yet. "Brennan runs out of a warehouse in the junction," Leon said, his voice steady, even with guns trained on his back. "But he doesn't sleep there. He's got a penthouse over Liberty Village, private underground parking. Hit him at the warehouse. It's a fortress. I know his schedule. I know when he moves every time. I don't trust a rat, Anatoly said. You don't have to trust him, Maya said. You have to trust me. She leaned forward, palms flat on her father's desk. Brennan wants me. He thinks I'm soft, a civilian who doesn't know the rules. So we give him exactly what he's expecting. Anatoly's face went pale. Absolutely not. I'm not putting you back in the line of fire. I'm already in the line of fire. She fired back, her voice carrying off the high ceiling. He won't stop. If he doesn't get me tonight, it's next week or next month. The only way to take the target off my back is to take out the man who put it there. For 2 hours, the study turned into a war room. Maya, with the same precise, methodical mind that had carried her through 3 years of nursing coursework, helped map the operation alongside her father and his men. Leon laid out the blind spots in Brennan's security, the exact rhythm of his routes. It was a strange and total reversal, the low-level runner and the exhausted nursing student now directing the dismantling of the second-largest organization in the city. At 3 a.m, the plan moved. Maya sat in the back of a decoy sedan in a Kevlar vest under a borrowed coat, Leon beside her in the front seat with a rifle across his lap. They parked openly in an alley 3 blocks from Brennan's warehouse. Leon called him from a burner phone. "Leon, you son of a—" Patrick's voice came through sharp and furious. 30 seconds. Why are my men dead and you're not? I've got the girl, Patrick. Leon kept his voice tight, manufactured panic threading through it. Volkov went crazy, started shooting everything that moved. I grabbed her in the chaos. I'm pinned 3 blocks out. Resnick's people are sweeping the grid. I need extraction now, or we both lose her. A long pause. Greed won, the way it always did with Patrick. Keep her quiet, I'm coming myself. The line went dead. Maya looked at Leon, her heart slamming against her ribs. He bought it. He bought it. Leon racked the charging handle of the rifle, then looked back at her, something softer crossing his face for just a moment. Whatever happens next, I'm sorry for how we met. But I'm not sorry I met you. She reached forward and gripped his shoulder hard. We finish this together. Minutes later, a line of black SUVs came tearing out of the underground garage beneath the warehouse, Patrick Brennan leading from the front, eager to claim his prize. As the convoy turned onto the empty street toward the alley, the trap closed. A flatbed truck reversed violently out of a side lane, T-boning the lead vehicle and sealing the road. Before Brennan's men could even get their seatbelts off, Anatoly Resnick's people opened fire from the rooftops above. It wasn't a fight, it was over almost before it started. Maya watched through the tinted glass as the organization that had hunted her was taken apart in under 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared and the silence settled back over the freezing street, her father walked over to the wreckage himself, slow and unbothered, to make sure the work was finished. The war was done before the sun came up over the lake. A week later, Maya stood on the balcony of a high-rise overlooking the water, the city lights smeared gold against the dark. She wore a tailored black coat, her hair pulled back. There was no more cramming in Robart's library. She'd deferred her term. The textbooks were packed away somewhere she hadn't bothered to check. The glass door slid open behind her. Leon stepped out in a dark suit that matched hers, no longer a man who had to disappear into a room to survive in it. He'd been formally brought into the Resnick organization, answering to her and no one else. "Your father called," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Brennan's territory is fully absorbed. The lakeshore contracts are signed over. You've got full control of the logistics side now." "Good," she said, low, taking a sip from the glass in her hand. She looked at the man who had lied to her, who had bled for her, and who had ultimately handed her the keys to the throne she never knew was waiting for her. "And the library?" "Robarts. Endowed. In your mother's name." A small, crooked smile. "Nobody touches it. Ever." Her smile, when it came, was the same warm one she'd given him over a table on the 8th floor 3 weeks ago, except it had hardened now into something unbreakable, something that would never again be mistaken for soft. She reached out and laced her fingers through his. She wasn't just Anatoly Resnick's daughter anymore. She was the heir apparent. and in the coldest corners of the city, she'd finally found someone she could sit with.